Thanks for coming. I hope you're enjoying Focus so far. There's more to come. Here in this room at 2:30 will be one of our keynote speakers, Cherith B. Nordling. She's in the room right there, right in the back. There she is. She'll be, I think it was right after this. She's also speaking tonight at what time, Cherith?
7.
7, okay. But double check. With it is 7. Great. And then tomorrow night is the minimum wage debate, and then Friday at travel time is Dr. Hayward speaking in the Canadian Wonder. So this talk is, as you see, the cyborg, the idiot, and the incarnation, defining humanity in a post-human world. And I thought we'd start, we'll just do this real quick. We're just going to take like 30 seconds or something like that. But I want you to turn to the person next to you. And real quickly, I want you to just give an answer about what a person has to have or be able to do in order to be a person. Essentially, what makes a person a person. If you don't know the person next to you and you find that they are of the attractive sort, well, be very clever with what you say. I think that's serious. I think that's serious. I'm guessing at some possible answers, since we don't have time to poll the room. But some of you might have said something about biological features, opposable thumbs, linguistic ability, bipedal, whatever the case might be. Some of you, the ones who are trying to charm the person next to you, might have said something like the ability to love, or such gobbledygook. And others might have gone with something very tautological, like I know a person when I see it. And maybe some of you went with something elemental like DNA or something. And it's obvious that if the answer to a question like this were simple, we wouldn't actually be having a presentation right now. But for argument's sake, let's show how some of these answers are problematic. So the first one, the biological features. Well, you can't name a biological feature that a person doesn't have or can't not have. So is it a matter of you just need a critical mass of biological features? What do you have to have? Not everybody has those same features. So children, for instance, the elderly do not have certain features in terms of language or whatever the case might be. The love answer, we'll just move on. I know your dog loves better than you do. So if love is the answer, may we all be dogs. And number 3, DNA seems like a fine answer, if not a reductive one. We all virtually share the same DNA. There are some changes, however, and if you said DNA, this would have consequences about early and late in life ethical decisions. We don't operate without answers to the question of what makes us a human. It's just that our answer is embedded into assumptions and ideologies. Asking questions can help tease this out. For instance, consider brain death. If our ability to reason and feel has nothing to do with defining our humanity, why do we keep brain-dead people alive? Or do any of you believe your smartphone is an extension of yourself? You operate as though you do, and not just because you spend a lot of time with it, but it's actually replaced your memory in many ways. Name your friend's phone number. You can't do it, because your smartphone is an extension of your cognitive ability. That's your memory. If you know Socrates and the Phaedrus, he didn't like the idea of writing. He didn't like the idea of writing because he thought that would take something away from humanity. You would memorize it. What about a pacemaker? A piece of technology that your heart depends on to remain alive. Or what if you were fully paralyzed, unable to move, but able to control a machine for all your needs? Are you less human? Half human? Or maybe even more than human, especially if the abilities that you were granted were greater than those without that technology? If we had the technology to mount your head on a robot, would you still be a human? What if we had the technology to mount a robotic head on your torso? Which one do you think can still be considered a person? And you're almost all saying the first one. And how did you get to that unless you see the mind as the key to your humanity? This presentation is meant to pull out some of the problems in how we define what a person is and how technology and philosophy affect that decision. I want to show how certain members of our society, namely the mentally disabled, become increasingly marginalized and susceptible to discrimination when our definition of our personhood is not adequately framed in the right ideology. I want to start with some history, because all boring presentations do start with history. But I want to look at a modern understanding of the self and try and locate that in a moment in time. And I want to start with the Enlightenment, that needed and good, but ultimately problematic era of history when reason became the modus operandi for attaining truth. It is a time when monarchies fall in political revolutions because the idea of a divinely appointed king is irrational and non-verifiable. It is a time when scientific discovery of the natural world through experimentation provides us with more information than our religious leaders. And the sciences dominate the cultural climate. I don't want to simplify, but I obviously am and obviously must. But this is the time when reason, logic, empiricism, and a distrust of that which cannot be observed takes over the culture. Part of that age of discovery is in our technology, of course, whether it be biological, chemical, or industrial. The Enlightenment naturally burst the Industrial Revolution, where technology, rather than individual mastery of a craft, is the key to economic success. We are, in short, understanding the physical world around us, including the physical makeup of ourselves, more than we ever have. We no longer believe a sea dragon lives in a woman's uterus, or that some rock formation is formed from a woman who weeped herself to death. We can identify, categorize, and therefore know nearly everything around us. The only thing that makes you not understand photosynthesis is just your refusal to learn. It's not because it's an actual mystery. Funny thing happened on the way to the utopia, though. And one of the best writers to speak about this is actually Karl Marx. Marx writes that in our industrial age we feel alienation. Marx sees an economic root to all this, but it's not difficult to expand it to other areas. Therefore, yes, economically, instead of making anything, you make a part and never see the whole. You are not a part of the transaction, instead you are an automaton of a very minute process, so you feel alienation at work. Cosmologically, you get why the earth is spinning. You know why it's doing that. You know why smoke rises. You're smarter than Aristotle. But you can't figure out what it's all doing it for. Biologically, you know what the spleen does. You know what the pancreas does, but you can't place yourself into any natural web or chain any more than a common chinchilla might be able to. I have no idea why I wrote chinchilla in that first draft, but I kept it there the entire time. The one thing you seemingly can't identify, categorize, and therefore know is yourself. And to quote the great Walter Percy, why is it possible to learn more in 10 minutes about the Crab Nebula in Taurus, which is 6,000 light years away, than you presently know about yourself, even though you've been stuck with yourself all your life? Of course, when I say knowing of the self, it's not the body that I'm talking about. We know all about the human body, so much so that we can categorize parts and people by the body. So let's look at just as an example, two categories of bodies that got identified post-Enlightenment. One, homosexuals, and second, mentally disabled. The term homosexual was first identified by the Oxford English Dictionary as being used in 1892. That term didn't exist before then. What does that mean? We had ways of referring to homosexual behavior, of course, and we had insults, plenty of them, for people who were gay. What we did not have is a medicalized term that makes sexual behavior a consistent ontological label. That happens only in modernity, when the body and its actions are pathologized into a medical understanding. Consider as well the mentally disabled. Up until the Industrial Revolution, we essentially had two terms for the mentally disabled: natural fool or idiot. Just since the late 19th century, I'm just going to list some of the terms we have. And these are all, at one point, seen as positive terms. No insults in this list. Retarded, handicapped, cretin, crippled, imbecile, moron, idiot, mentally disabled, cognitively disabled, intellectually disabled, developmentally disabled, and special needs. Even the term like cretin. Cretin began in France as a way of looking at certain people who had congenital hypothyroidism, which we now call cretinism. They called them cretins because they were trying to convince other people that they are indeed chrétiens. They are Christians. And then it got dysfamized, and so cretin became a really negative term. But it started off as a term of, hey, these mentally disabled people are people too. So why the proliferation of terms? Because we are learning supposedly about these bodies and labeling them as we go. These are deviant bodies that I'm talking about right now. And are something to be examined like the fossilized bones of an Allosaurus. It's like the chinchilla. Why Allosaurus? Because my son likes Allosaurus. The result then is that the body becomes part of the natural order, estranged from our existential reality. And what we know of the body, we are uncomfortable with. Our bodies break down. They are limiting. We find them ugly. The disabled body, the body that by definition is more limited, is an affront to our fantasy about what we really are and what we can be. Should it be a terrible surprise then that it is in the 19th century and 20th centuries that disabled bodies began to be quarantined, encouraged to be in institutions and homes apart from the rest of us? Disability is not contagious, we know, but who wants an unstable, irrational body reminding us of things we only encounter in our nightmares? In the midst of this primacy of reason and empiricism, in the midst of this subsequent alienation, is the technological boom of the last 150 years. And I'm not going to spend any time proving that. I don't think I need to. But just to remind you, in 1907, the Wright brothers flew an airplane 120 feet at 7 miles per hour. And now we have a remote-controlled car on Mars that we are controlling from this country. We then have three ingredients: an increasing reliance on our minds, and a faith in our minds, an increasing alienation and discomfort with our physical bodies, and an increasing ability to create new bodies through rapidly advancing technology. Ancient Greeks had ideas about automatons. Vulcan, or Hephaestus, had his automatons. Da Vinci designed a kind of humanoid robot. But it's in the 20th century we have the ideological need and the technological ability to build not only robots, but extensions of ourselves. We found ourselves able to improve those bodies we don't particularly care very much for. And this all leads us to posthumanism. To be clear, posthumanism does not mean after humans. It's not the apocalyptic time when humans are wiped out. Instead, it means a new conception of the human, and it's melding through technology, whether that be through genetic manipulation, robotics, or drug therapies. Humanity Plus is a transhumanist advocacy organization. And they are different, but for the sake of this talk, I'm just transhumanism and posthumanism, I'm just sort of collapsing into one term. And they give a definition of posthumanism. This is possible future beings whose basic capacities so radically exceed those of present humans as to be no longer unambiguously human by our current standards. I know you're not supposed to put a lot of text up there, what would you do? Posthumans could be completely synthetic artificial intelligences, or they could be enhanced uploads, or they could be the result of making many smaller but cumulatively profound augmentations to a biological human. The latter alternative would probably require the redesign of the human organism, using advanced nanotechnology or its radical enhancement using some combination of technology such as genetic engineering, psychopharmacology, anti-aging therapies, neural interfaces, advanced information management tools, memory-enhancing drugs, wearable computers, and cognitive techniques. This, of course, sounds like science fiction, and frankly, science fiction writers have all but predicted most of the stuff that's happening in our culture right now. It's not really science fiction, though, because it actually indeed is reality. Let's just look at a few examples that are currently occurring in the West, or could occur in the West. In 2012, Jan Sherman, who became paralyzed as an adult from a genetic disease, was the pilot subject for a robotic arm built by the Johns Hopkins Institute that would be moved just by her thinking to move the arm. She not only can move the arm with the thoughts, she currently can move the arm in the same way we move our arm, without consciously doing it. So that none of you in this room think, arm go up. She no longer, with that robotic arm, must say, arm go up. She can just make the arm go up. Subconsciously, however you want to say it. This past year at the World Cup in Brazil, there was a ceremonial opening kick. That ceremonial opening kick It was by a young man who was paralyzed from the waist down. He was placed into a robotic exoskeleton suit, and he kicked the soccer ball with his thoughts. He moved his robotic exoskeleton with his thoughts. This means the very same way you are moving your arm right now, we are able to do, much slower of course, but it's only going to improve with robotics. Genetics. The ability to modify the genetic information of people is already here. It's illegal in countries like the UK, and the United States will not fund any laboratory that does reprogenetics. But we can do it. So if there's a country that doesn't want to make it illegal, modified babies are here. They're not in science fiction. They're here. And then drug therapy. Just think about steroids, PEDs, human growth hormone. Human growth hormone, if you have surgery, you might be given human growth hormone because it helps you heal. But it's illegal to take in college and professional football. And this helps us because when considering the ethics of some of these technologies, we might consider the difference between enhancement and therapy. Who would deny a paralyzed person the ability to recreate the natural motions of the arm? Who would deny a post-op patient from receiving a drug to speed recovery? But what to do with someone like Oscar Pistorius? Having nothing to do with his legal problems. But he's if you don't know, he's the South African who in 2012 qualified for the Olympics. Not the Paralympics, he qualified for the Olympics. He doesn't have legs below the knee. And he qualified for the Olympics. We are at a point in time when prosthetics are not necessarily a hindrance anymore, but could very well be an enhancement. In posthumanism, there is no distinction between enhancement and therapy. Why would there be? There is no distinction between body and prosthesis. As Catherine Hales writes, the posthuman view thinks of the body as the original prosthesis we all learn to manipulate, so that extending or replacing the body with other prostheses becomes a continuation of a process that began before we were born. Of course, the brain is physical too. But it is separated from the rest of the body, for here lies the seat of our humanity. The conception of the human is evolving to a place where artificial distinctions between natural and addition need not be considered. To quote Donna Haraway, for us, in imagination and in other practice, machines can be prosthetic devices, intimate components, friendly cells. We don't need organic holism to give impermeable wholeness. Hopefully you can see how a desire to see the current conception of the human to become posthuman is entirely consistent with a post-enlightenment understanding of the person. First, there is progress. Evolution is progress. And if this is the next step in human evolution, why would there be any hesitation to progress? Second, our faith in the mind, in empiricism, in reason, and technology are all proven triumphant. Here, not only are our minds enhanced, our bodies, which we are so terribly uncomfortable with, need not be the hindrance we see them as. Our language of having no limits can be fulfilled. The only thing we need is a self-aware consciousness, and we can theoretically become immortal. This is the idea of brain uploading, where you will upload your consciousness into a computer. So I'm just going to mention that and move on, just to guarantee that there's going to be questions after the talk. Though it might seem otherwise, I'm actually not all that concerned today to be talking about the technology of posthumanism. It's happening, people. I'm not trying to talk about artificial intelligence and the fact that your kid is going to marry a robot named Turbotron 5000. It's happening. She's lovely. Give her a chance. But instead I want to talk about the philosophical basis of posthumanism that is already currently present in our world and all but assuredly present in this room as well. In posthumanism, the mind is made stronger. Consciousness remains recognizable, and the body becomes utterly flexible into whatever it needs to be. We can see analogs in this with someone like the philosopher or bioethicist, as he likes to be called, Peter Singer. Singer understands the value of life to be based on the ability to reason, something that is not posthumanism in and itself, but certainly breeds posthumanism. For instance, here's a quote from Peter Singer in a debate with Tom Koch. The definition of a person that I hold is, as I have written in Practical Ethics and other works, derived from John Locke's definition of a person as a thinking, intelligent being that has reason and reflection and can consider itself as itself, the same thinking thing in different times and places. The quote is interesting because A, it is rooted in the Enlightenment, as John Locke is a major philosopher of the era, showing how consistent posthumanism is with modernity. And B, shows us that Singer understands humanity to be a matter of the ability to reason. The posthuman fantasy of enhancing what it is to be a person is maintained not only because reason and rationality remain, but because they are made triumphant. Your analytical abilities are increased. Your logical patterns of thought are greater than they've ever been. Your body is a prosthesis of your true self. It can be exchanged. It can be replaced. Because the real you is on the inside. Consider this a moment. How many times have you heard or said someone saying things like, the real you is on the inside? It made you think, oh, I mean the soul when I say that. Well, to a neurobiologist, however, the soul is just a euphemism for the brain. All consciousness arises from the brain. You say the real you is on the inside, and posthumanists believe consciousness is the root source of humanity. You are all but saying the exact same thing. Of course, if that consciousness, that ability to reason, is the real you, that raises serious questions about those who are not able to reason. Not necessarily children, since they contain the potential for that triumphant ability to reason. Well then, what about children who do not have that potential? What are they? Are they people then? Well, according to Peter Singer, no. This is from his seminal work, Practical Ethics. If we were to, so there's a lot of words here, but I wanted you to see them. I really, really want you to see them. You'll see why. If we were to approach the issue of life or death for a seriously disabled human infant without any prior discussion of the ethics of killing in general, we might be unable to resolve the conflict between the widely accepted obligation to protect the sanctity of human life and the goal of reducing suffering. Some say that such decisions are subjective, or that life and death questions must be left to God and nature. Our previous discussions have, however, prepared the ground, and the principles established and applied in the preceding 3 chapters make the issue much less baffling than most take it to be. Infants are sentient beings who are neither rational nor self-conscious. So if we turn to consider the infants in themselves, independently of the attitudes of their parents, since their species is not relevant to their moral status, your ability to reason is what is relevant to your moral status. The principles that govern the wrongness of killing non-human animals who are sentient but not rational or self-conscious must apply here too. As we saw, the most plausible arguments for attributing a right to life to a being apply only if there is some awareness of oneself as a being existing over time, or as a continuing mental self. Nor can respect for autonomy apply where there is no capacity for autonomy. Hence, the quality of life that the infant can be expected to have is important. When the death of a disabled infant will lead to the birth of another infant with better prospects of a happy life, the total amount of happiness will be greater if the disabled infant is killed. The loss of happy life for the first instant is outweighed by the gain of a happier life for the second. Therefore, if killing the disabled infant has no adverse effect on others, it would, according to the total view, be right to kill him. So we come then to the problem of the mentally disabled. What do we make of them? If we accept the Enlightenment-bred understanding of what a person is that finds its extension in philosophers like Peter Singer and the values of posthumanism, what then are people who are mentally disabled? What they are, of course, is subhuman, because they do not contain the necessary requirements for what a person needs to be defined as such. A suboptimal consciousness, to both Singer and posthumanism, is a moral deficiency, an evil. Let me bring the attention of another philosopher, a very popular one, by the name of Richard Dawkins. Dawkins is by trade an evolutionary biologist, but he is very popular in pop culture. Last year, Dawkins mistakenly made a tweet public to a woman who was pregnant with a child with trisomy 21, commonly known as Down syndrome. Dawkins said she should abort the child and received much criticism for it. Some of that criticism was due to the fact that he was a man and telling a woman what to do with her body. Some of that criticism was from disability advocates who heard a man say a disabled child was less than human. Dawkins responded in full on his website to the controversy, and I want to quote him at length here. This is to that woman. Obviously, the choice would be yours. For what it's worth, my own choice would be to abort the Down fetus, and assuming you want a baby at all, try again. Given a free choice of having an early abortion or deliberately bringing a Down child into the world, I think the moral and sensible choice would be to abort. And indeed, that is what the great majority of women in America, and especially in Europe, actually do. I personally would go further and say that if your morality is based, as mine is, on a desire to increase the sum of happiness and reduce suffering, the decision to deliberately give birth to a down baby, when you have the choice to abort it early in the pregnancy, might actually be immoral from the point of view of the child's own welfare. I agree that that personal opinion is contentious and needs to be argued further, possibly be withdrawn. In any case, you would probably be condemning yourself as a mother or yourselves as a couple to a lifetime of caring for an adult with the needs of a child. Your child would probably have a short life expectancy, but if she did outlive you, you would have the worry of who would care for her after you are gone. No wonder most people choose abortion when offered the choice. Having said that, the choice would be entirely yours, and I would never dream of trying to impose my views on you or anyone else. To be clear, the following is occurring. A, the purpose of life is to increase the sum of happiness and reduce suffering. B, the disabled child does not fit into the mathematical equation of happiness. C, the termination of the disabled child's existence is morally required. D, not terminating the child is immoral. And E, the disabled child is not really a child. I would claim that all of those are embedded into Dawkins' language. To repeat, Peter Singer is not a posthumanist per se, neither is Dawkins. But what brings us to posthumanism is occurring currently in our culture with two of the most popular philosophers read in the West today. You can find them both in airport bookstores. I cannot name you a third philosopher that would be in an airport bookstore, but you can find both of these guys. So let us not think that these are like fringe voices in our culture. All of this then is demanding what a person actually is. Is a person a consciousness that has the ability to be self-aware and reason? If that's what a person is, then whether you're a Christian or not, Dawkins and Singer are right. Posthumanism is progress and a positive. In fact, I would suggest most of you in this room agree with Dawkins, Singer, and the tenets of posthumanism. Many of you believed in the A and B conclusions of what I said Dawkins wrote. A, the purpose of life is to increase the sum of happiness and reduce suffering. If you ask yourself why you're in college, I bet you can't come up with an answer that gets away from that. B, the disabled child does not fit in the mathematical equation of happiness, because the vast majority of you in here abide by those first two principles. Of course, you might be horrified by C through E, the extension of its first two ideas, but you still believe you are what you are by your ability to reason, to be self-aware, and to make rational decisions. Your sentimentality might be all that holds you from the same understanding of what a person actually is. You are outraged by someone like Dawkins because you imagine a high-functioning person with autism, or a person with Down syndrome that you find cute and adorable. Disability is not always cute, and that sentimentality will collapse when your aesthetic demands are not met and your ideological foundation is absent. I would suggest, however, that Christianity itself, no matter whether you are Protestant, Catholic, or Orthodox, has a distinct answer to posthumanism and its allies, one that is not simply rooted in sentimentality, or frankly rooted in either the mind or the body. The ideological answer to posthumanism and its allies is the Incarnation. The virgin conception and birth of Christ into the physical world is not simply the step on the road to Calvary. The Incarnation must be held up with the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension of Christ, all as a vital tenet of Christianity. What does the Incarnation mean? It means God became flesh. It means the divine nature took on matter, and by doing so, divinized it. The Incarnation is not a rhetorical flourish to the language of being made in the image and likeness of God in Genesis. It is a radicalization of this idea in that God has participated in it and shared his divinity. When Christ is baptized, it is baptism that is revolutionized. When he dies, it is death that is revolutionized. And when he takes on human nature is revolutionized. What gives all life a sacred quality? What makes humanity in itself valuable? It is not a declaration of human rights made by the United Nations, though I obviously salute all calls to the sacredness of life. It is the historical moment of the Incarnation that makes life sacred, because life is now divine. St. John of Damascus is one of the most powerful church fathers to explicate exactly what the Incarnation is. It's a 7th and 8th century saint. He's writing in a culture where Islam had spread all around him. He writes in his book, He writes a book called On Divine Images, and these are some quotes from it. I do not adore creation more than the Creator, but I adore the creature created as I am, adopting creation freely and spontaneously that He might elevate our nature and make us partakers of His divine nature, quote Peter. Together with my Lord and King, I worship Him clothed in the flesh, not as if He were a garment or He constituted a fourth person of the Trinity, God forbid. That flesh is divine. I do not worship matter, I worship the God of matter, who became matter for my sake and deigned to inhabit matter, who worked out my salvation through matter. On this account, Christ took a body and a soul, as man has both one and the other. The Incarnation does not unite our souls to the divine. It unites our entire humanity to the divine, both physical and spiritual. Humans are sacred because of the Incarnation. Humans are immortal because of the Incarnation. Due to the Incarnation, then, there is no possibility that we are either A, souls stuck in this mortal coil, or B, minds limited to a body. Our mental processes no more make us human than our 10 fingers make us human. I am Eastern Orthodox, and I want to explain our communion to you just as an example of an extension of what this might mean. So in Orthodoxy, we commune all baptized and chrismated Orthodox Christians, no matter their age, no matter their intellectual ability. Since we baptize babies, you get baptized at 40 days, that means we give communion to small babies. It means we allow the mentally disabled, who have no idea what they are doing, who cannot distinguish communion from an 11 a.m. snack on Sunday mornings, to commune. All this while, we believe that this is really God. We don't think it's just a symbol. And so we don't let them have it because it doesn't matter. We let them have it because it does matter. Because communion, the Eucharist, is not tested by our ability to reason. It is tested by our humanity. And thus all those who reason like infants, whether they be infants or adults, are welcome. Their humanity is divinity due to the Incarnation, not their ability to reason, to progress, to make machines, or to become machines. I just want to throw out some sort of almost random final thoughts. First, about posthumanism. Make no mistake about what posthumanism really is. It is a desire for immortality. It is a kind of religion. It is a need to escape the narrative of all humankind that you are going to die. Technologies to enhance human capabilities, whether it be through gene therapy or communion with machines, are the hope for eternal salvation. Though draped in language of future progress, the fear of death permeates posthumanism. The body is insulting because the death of the body is terribly frightening. The inferior ability of the mentally disabled must be a life of suffering and pain because the ability to reason is, according to posthumanism, the only achievement we have that separates us from the rest of the cosmos. Our long need to end our exile means that Singer, Dawkins, and other philosophers locate our humanity in reason and rationality, because here the insult of mortality might be kept at bay. I frankly find it cute when I have friends who lapse from Christianity and say it doesn't really matter, it's all common sense or something like that. Singer and Dawkins have a totally radicalized version of what it means to be humanity, and the only answer I have for them is Christianity. If you leave Christianity, you don't necessarily have to be Dawkins or Singer, but you better find something else, because this is not a fringe belief. Consider what disability is. It is an affront to our progress. It is an insult to our limitlessness, because here is a physical or mental encasement. Disability, to posthumanists, if not humanists too, is a rhetorical reminder of limits, of impossibilities, and even of death. And look, this is a fact of life. Most disabilities are a decided disadvantage. There's no reason to pretend otherwise. And they often make a person in chronic pain or suffering. But we do not need to run from what suffering means. Well, of course, we hope to alleviate the suffering of those around us, and are not against the technologies that help alleviate that suffering, of course. The persistence of that suffering, of assorted disabilities, does not need to drive us into hopes of immortality through abandonment of the body, nor devaluing those persons who we cannot imagine being anything but anchors to our progress. We need not run from what suffering and death mean. Christ, as much as he made divine our humanity, made divine our suffering and death through the crucifixion and the resurrection. Beware of Christians and non-Christians alike, who talk about resurrection and embodiment, who praise our bodies, only to be frightened or ignore the disabled body and mind. Do you know who is aware of what embodiment really is like? The infirm, the elderly, the disabled. They're often never at the table, however, especially in Christian conversations about what we mean when we say embodiment. When their existence is rhetorically erased, if not physically erased, we then say the only bodies worth embodying are those that are beautiful, powerful, and rhetorically no different than the posthuman quest to see the bionic body so that consciousness might go on forever. You are all going to be disabled. It's the only minority group that you can become. Through senility, through trauma, you will become mentally disabled if you live long enough. If dementia or trauma frightens you because grandmother isn't grandmother anymore, this is understandable. She is not the person you grew up with. But if dementia or trauma or diseases of the mind frighten you because you believe your humanity is reduced because of it, or that grandmother's humanity is reduced because of it, then no such a belief is patently unchristian, and it necessarily devalues the humanity of those such as the mentally disabled, who are the only ones in our culture not afforded the chance to speak up for themselves. Of course, it's speaking of the severely disabled. Understand the Incarnation and live your life accordingly. Stand in solidarity with the mentally disabled. Do not allow the implicit philosophy of posthumanism and its allies to devalue them in our culture. The Transfiguration did not transfigure the male Semitic body. It did not transfigure the beautiful body. It did not transfigure complex informational processes located in our brain. It transfigured our entire humanity. It transfigured your body as surely as it transfigured the disabled body. The disabled body or the disabled mind is not a testament against the Incarnation or the Transfiguration. It is a testament to the beauty of those things. Transfiguration transfigured you and your incredibly complex ability to reason and speak, and it transfigured those who will always reason like infants and speak in grunts and spittle. This is not tragic. This is the beautiful love of the divine and our true salvation. So I'll stop there, and hopefully there's questions. So there's a microphone up here, so I'd like you to come up here and stand into the microphone. I'm just kidding. So if you have a question, by all means, ask away. Show. Hey, wait, Heather, do you know if it's...
You have to turn it on.
Do I have to turn it on?
Oh, hello? Hey, oh, it's on. Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Just ruined this whole presentation.
Well, honestly, it was a great presentation. Thanks so much. Concerning the Incarnation changing value of humanity, would you say that that somehow bled back in time, or how does that take into account the humans pre-incarnation?
Yeah, it's a great theological question, and my short answer is yes. God is outside of time. This is why, at least for us, it's a very common icon of the resurrection. It's actually Christ pulling out sort of the ancestral Adam and Eve, because this is an act that does not just transform what is now and in the future, it transformed the past as well. Now, the sort of weirdness of space-time and whatnot starts in, but what do you think is going to happen when you're dealing with a God outside of time? Constantly locating God within time, and constantly limiting God, of course. So, short answer is yes. Long answer is
I guess my question would be then, in the light of the Incarnation, what would you say a person is? Because you talk about posthuman saw it like the base of reason. So what would you say the Incarnation is like the base of a person?
Well, I can't identify it in the visible. Because if I identify it in the visible, then I'm a materialist. I'm not a materialist. So I look at what a human is the entirety of humanity. And I can strip things away from that person, and it does not diminish the person. So when I ask the initial question of if you are only half a person physically or something like that, are you only half a person? Of course not. Is a baby who is 1/12 your size 1/12 a human? No, that diminishing of the physical, of the material, never diminishes the eternal part that is united to the divine through the Incarnation. So it's not like a mathematical formula. And frankly, if someone like Peter Singer was here, it's pretty obvious that answer doesn't fly with him. I'm okay with that, because we have sort of different beliefs about immaterial reality and eternity and things like that. But yeah, I would say you simply cannot locate it in one single thing. Nor does the absence of one single thing mean the lack of humanity.
So essentially what you're saying is that if you were initially born, whatever is taken away or added to you at any point in your life, it does not take away or add to your humanity?
Yes. I mean, some of you in the room would remember this. I certainly didn't. But remember when the first test tube baby was born? What would that mean to the humanity of that child? Do any of you worry about that right now? Do any of you millennials in any way even think about the humanity of that child might be in some way compromised because of the way it was conceived? No, you do not. You can't point to a thing that makes something a person. Certainly not that thing which seems the most universal, our brains, which is our most complex tool. If any large jungle cat that I bring into this room right now, and I've got like 4 in the hallway, you can't name a large predator that you would beat. Oh no, I think dogs should scare his eye out. No, you're always going to lose to a large predator. Because what is the tool that you have that makes you dominant over other species? It's your brain. How natural then, right? So you build some type sort of trap or something like that. Or you just think and push your friend in front. But in that situation, of course, you create. So of course, when we're talking about humanity being defined by our mental ability, what we're doing is we're extrapolating from our greatest tool. This is what makes us unique, therefore this must be what it is that makes us who we are. You can somehow imagine, this is really weird, but just as a thought experiment, Christ is incarnated as an elephant. Well, guess what an elephant now is? Divine. We are what we are because of the Incarnation, and we can't prove that in a laboratory. But if your only way of discovering truth can be found in the laboratory, okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
So kind of drawing on what you said about like Singer or Dawkins were here, and what their response would be to us using the Incarnation as kind of our reason. How do we go about like responding to their justification of like Dawkins' quote, "Curing the disabled"? How do we kind of engage in any sort of dialogue that will help to what we do without enforcing?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a really hard question because you can't debate with people that you don't have shared terms of. So how do you debate someone about reality if you have a fundamental disagreement about what reality is? Why are you engaging in that debate in the first place? To convince yourself that you're right, which is often why we actually debate. This happens when students like debate gay marriage and stuff like that. Like, well, why are you debating gay marriage? Can you all agree on what marriage is in the first place? Oh, you can't? So why are you arguing a modifier? Argue the first principle first. And that would be the case, and I simply wouldn't. I mean, I don't know what I can say to someone who only accepts a material reality, who only accepts consciousness as the value of human life. I don't know what I can say. I do know that Peter Singer's mother, and I don't say this with a smirk or anything like that, he has softened a bit in the last few years. And the reason Singer softened a bit is because his mother started getting dementia. Because he loves his mother. And this is one of the reasons the mentally disabled need to be in our culture. This is one of the reasons you all should know what the Torrance Center is here in Jackson County. It's the best school in Jackson County, where the severely disabled kids go who can't be taught in the individual schools. Because the more they're sort of isolated, the more it's easier to just sort of imagine what they are. When a singer starts to have personal interactions, it starts to change. And so maybe I would say, you know what, singer, Dawkins, you win. But I will announce to this entire room that you win the debate. But will you come for a week to my daughter's school? And then if he says yes, then I'm fine. I'll lose the emotion. Maybe that would actually change.
You mentioned briefly about brain uploading. So I thought I'd bring that back up again. And I just wondered, like, if you think that we'll ever get to the point with science that we can actually upload our brains and become immortal.
Yeah, so it's like uploading your brains and what you're of course, because if I'm coming from a totally materialist perspective, all consciousness arises from an organic place. And so biology open here, you know it's more than just the brain. That, you know, nerves have memory as well. It's more than just brain. Simplifying by just saying brain, of course. But let's just simplify and say brain. You're uploading all of the readings that is happening with the brain, and then attempting to recreate the consciousness that is a result of all of those physical things. So we don't have that technology right now. But we are currently slicing the brain in very, very thin segments, and then putting on a computer all of the readings that come from that. Now, whether that would create a person, of course, I think all of us in the room would say no. But whether it creates this kind of automaton machine, you know, I mean, I'm still going to be like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. But that's certainly the sort of that is the great frontier that they would be looking for. I mean, realistically, in the same way that none of you have a problem with wearable technology, none of you have a problem with the new phones that are going to come out that you're just like wearing on your hand and stuff like that, because it happens in increments. And this sort of the brain uploading thing to us right now sounds really bizarre, but it's going to happen incrementally. You will have robots in your house. You're going to have them. And none of you have any issues being in a factory line with a robotic arm working, which you might have 100 years ago. It's just because it happens incrementally, it won't, to us, like uploading a brain is just, what? But if it actually happens, it would happen so incrementally, we might even know that it happened. It's just, yeah, it's sort of the natural next step.
What books would we read, or what movies would we see that would give us the point of view that Dawkins and Singer have? Because I think that kind of stuff dehumanizes us. And I want your help in helping me to see what's out there that's trying to dehumanize me and make me more like Dawkins or more like Singer as I read a story or as I watch a movie.
You know, I mean, I think science fiction is great, but science fiction is like saying I think novels are great. They come in all different stripes, and there's a lot of science fiction that is problematic. I mean, Philip K. Dick, for as instrumental as he is in modern science fiction, Robert Heinlein as well. These guys, there's some really problematic understandings of a person. So I think a lot of science fiction is problematic, even if it is enjoyable. I don't think it necessarily has to be avoided, but I think you should just know what you're getting into. But this is maybe a little tangential to the question, but it's the opportunity I'm going to say it, Chuck. How many of you know the book Flowers for Algernon? Okay. I find that book ethically horrifying. But it's generally taught around the 8th grade or 9th grade as a way of teaching you how to be nice to people who are mentally disabled. What the book is really doing, though, in its performance, there's some published article out there about it. I can't remember the author. But, see what I did there. What the book is actually doing is you're really optimistic in the beginning. I mean, you really like him. He's like, oh, you know, pitiful Charlie. And Charlie gets really smart. He goes through some operation. But Charlie starts to descend after the operation, and you're horrified. Why are you horrified that he's descending back to mental disability? Because mental disability is a rhetorical death in the book. Because why are you just being like, you know what? He was great before the operation, he's going to be great after the operation too. Not a problem. No, the rhetoric of the book is he is dying because he is becoming mentally disabled. This might be the same way you might think about dementia in your own life. if you start to we can't really say become demented because of the pejorative that is, but if you start to suffer from dementia, you might have that same thought. So that would be a book that to me is like a sneaky on the surface, and I think it's actually the author's intention to do something good. But I think what the product of it was actually really problematic, So it's just a very popular book. That's why I wanted to bring it up. I think it gets read still a lot. Mike?
Yeah, Dr. Cline, you talked about the incremental steps that are being taken to adapt different cybernetic functions within humanity. What are the most dangerous ones in your, from your perspective, that are affecting and perhaps taking away from our humanity that might be detrimental?
I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to pretend to know like all the intricacies that are going on. So again, I have the floor, so I'm just going to change the question to what I want it to be. I think you all interact with Twitter and on Facebook with corporations, non-human corporations, and they friend you, and you friend them. I think you have relationships online, either romantic or not, that you see as a kind of intimacy that you can't have in the physical. Whatever's going to come on the horizon that will dehumanize us, we're already laying the great groundwork right now in the way we operate. And I'm not a Luddite about like, so you have to get off Facebook or you have to get off Twitter. But it's the sort of thoughtless consuming of this. I don't know if you guys saw the Coke commercial at the Super Bowl. There's a Coke commercial at the Super Bowl like, don't be mean anymore. And it put this Twitter machine up and like, it like turned bad stuff into good stuff, right? So just troll messages were turned into something nice. Well, some website, do you know what the website was? Some website started feeding it Mein Kampf. And people got really upset about this. But I think it might have been Gawker or something like that. But Gawker was trying to say like, look, this is a gigantic corporation only doing marketing to make money off of you. They're not trying to teach you to be nice. But people were in an uproar over what Gawker had done. They're like, come on, leave this gigantic multinational corporation alone. They're just trying to be friendly. They can't be friendly. They're not a person. I'm not talking about the legality of whether a corporation is a person or not. Theologically, a corporation is not a person. The person you met on Facebook, that is not a person. We are not uncoupled consciousness just existing online. So, you watch a movie like Her, which is fantastic. There's a movie, Chuck. I actually think it's fantastic, though. It's a really great movie. But we're already laying the groundwork right now. Be afraid of, again, your kid bringing half-robotic grandkids home or something like that. No, be worried about the dehumanization that already occurs right now. Be concerned about when you're at McDonald's and a severely mentally disabled person comes in, that you start to freak out. Something's going on there. Don't be worried about robots. They're coming. But you can't stop it, so they will all be our own robots. But truly, the more concerning thing is what we're doing right now. What we're doing right now. So I want to respect the time, so we'll just take one more question, and that way everyone can take a break and then come back into the room for this morning's talk. We have a final question. Someone who wants to praise our robot overlords.
I really enjoyed your talk.
So you talked a little bit about Pistorius and his augmentations, enhancements. When do you see that actually happening? That consistently we're looking at these physical enhancements. I mean, PEDs and human growth hormone are there now, but like what's coming next, and how do we keep the NFL pure?
Sounds like a better question for a podcast than a book. The Pistorius thing is not as concerning as what will probably happen with gene manipulation. Choosing the ability to change the musculoskeletal structure of an adult through gene therapy. The prosthesis thing is probably, it's like the jetpack thing. Like, still waiting on those jetpacks, but we can clone people. Where's my anti-gravity boots? But we've got a rover on Mars. So I would look at what's going to happen with children. Because look, if you take a country like China, who has there's loosening of a one-child policy, it's not far away, for the rich, of course, it's not far away for that one child to be made perfect. Pre-utero. And then what kind of league will you have? Will you have a league for the enhanced and then the league for the unenhanced? How will you prove enhancement? I mean, Gattaca is another movie that's out there that's flawed but still really worth watching about this very thing. I mean, look, I'd be lying if I said I was very hopeful about what's going to happen. But the thing I'm much more concerned about is what's happening to people like the mentally disabled right now, rather than what's going to happen with robots in 40 years. And that's what I would encourage you to act on and to consider and to at least occupy your thoughts sometimes. Okay, thanks a lot for coming.